Welcome to an edition of Boxing Info. I'm your host, The Islander. I just want to start off this segment by saying I'm sorry I didn't do a preview show for these fights this past weekend because there were a couple of things on the docket that looked pretty interesting, and I just was busy with other things. As I know some of you are going to say, well, you're putting those other videos up there and stuff like that. You know, one thing I want to say is that I don't know what the deal is with YouTube, but like that Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes video that I put up there, that took all freaking day to upload. I'm talking about, like, you know, from 10:30 in the morning until like after I left my office at 7:30 at night, and it still wasn't done. It took all day to upload, you know, that, well, it was about almost a gig file, but these other files that I'm uploading, like that are, you know, 20 or 30 minute videos, those are only like 400 megabytes, and it's still taken several hours to upload them. So, and that's one of the drawbacks to doing these videos. Now, I don't know what the deal is with YouTube, but it's taken longer and longer to get videos uploaded. But that's neither here nor there. All right, let's go over what just happened this past weekend, because I did not do a review of this, and there were some interesting things around the world that happened. Starting off in Germany, in which IBF Cruiserweight champion Steve Cunningham was defending his title against world-famous Cuban amateur star Juan Pablo Hernandez. And basically what happened in this fight, one of the things when you can't see something televised, you gotta like watch it in choppy sections, and people upload it on YouTube or other sites, and you can't watch it in succession. You really can't get a feel for how momentum is established and changed in a fight. And in this fight, Hernandez cracked Cunningham on the temple in the first round with a left hand and sent him down, and basically Cunningham was really hurt and had to struggle to get up and hold on and basically right himself in the second round. So basically, if you're looking at this, in my mind, Hernandez is up 3 points after 2 rounds. And then Cunningham started turning the fight, in which he started digging in good right hands and good shots to the body. And the two clashed heads because it was a conventional fighter, southpaw kind of thing. And the first cut was open along the forehead of Hernandez that bled. It wasn't in a real bad spot, but it was bleeding down his face. And then another one opened over in the 6th round over his eye, and there was in a worse spot, but still, you know, from what I've read and what I've seen, the reaction of the corners and the reaction of the announcers, even though I couldn't understand them, the fight probably could have still went on. British referee Mickey Vann called the fight off and went to the scorecards, in which one judge had Steve Cunningham ahead by 1 point, which looked to probably be accurate after he had overcome the 3-point deficit. You figure it took 4 rounds and he was pretty much 3, 4, 5, and 6. Maybe not. Maybe it should have been a draw. You know, it was going to be close anyway. And the other 2 judges had Hernandez up by a couple of points, which gave him the title on technical decision. Strange things have been happening with the IBF lately. This fight, with the referee stopping a fight that could probably went on, as well as the Abner Mares-Joseph Agbeko fight, which thankfully is going to be rematched in December. Officiating has been very strange. So in conclusion, Juan Pablo Hernandez lifted the IBF Cruiserweight title, if not temporarily, from Steve Cunningham, and that was in Germany. In Puerto Rico, Juan Manuel Lopez got back into the ring for the first time since losing to Orlando Salido, losing his title and his status in the pound-for-pound rankings. And he took on American Mike Oliver, and this fight was a mismatch from the get-go. But here is basically Lopez scored a 2nd round stoppage in which he drove Oliver to the deck 3 times. A couple of times in the 1st round, and then with a right hand to the head, a right hook to the head in the 2nd round. And it looked like the fight was going to continue, but Oliver, I guess, told the referee he couldn't continue, and they stopped the bout. What do we take from this? Well, Mike Oliver came in severely overmatched, and he played his part to be the easy knockout victim to JuanMa. Now here's the problem. He also caught JuanMa with a lot of punches in those less than 6 minutes. And unless they teach JuanMa some better defensive techniques, he's going to suffer the same fate against Orlando Salido they did the first time. Or he's going to get decimated when he fights against Gamboa if they make that fight. This is not something that's new. It's just alarming after a stoppage loss that they had not sewn up these holes in his defense. And you know, it's just going to be, I don't know, it's foreshadowing is what the literature experts call it, foreshadowing for things to come. Rocky Martinez scored a former WBO lightweight titleist who lost his title, Ricky Burns, scored an impressive 6th round stoppage over Daniel Atta of Nigeria, in which he scored 3 knockdowns over the usually durable Atta to get back on his winning ways. He had not fought since losing the title, Ricky Burns. Next card was in Las Vegas, and this was interesting, in which Toshiaki Nishioka, who's making title defense number 7 of the WBC junior featherweight super bantamweight title. Remember, on his resume are also a knockout over Johnny Gonzalez. He was defending against Rafael Marquez, which most of us, including myself, thought this was going to be the end of the line for him. He is a very heady southpaw who processes information very well during a fight, and he spotted Marquez the first few rounds of this fight until he started getting going. And as he did, he is one of the very few southpaws that I have seen to be able to get out of the way of a good lead right hand, which Marquez was imploring. And about midway through this fight, all of a sudden Marquez was unable to land that punch with any authority like he was earlier. It was almost like Nishioka tasted Marquez's power, saw the angle at which he was throwing the punch, saw his footwork, and then basically made an adjustment midway through the fight and was able to get out of the way of it, and in turn was landing his own lead left hand. He too was also the victim of a accidental headbutt that opened a cut along his hairline, which bled throughout the fight. But Nishioka pulled away in this fight and won by scores of 117-111, which was a little ridiculous, 116-112, which I thought was more in line, and 115-113 if you're being generous to Marquez. Definitely a 7-5, 8-4 victory for Nishioka. I thought Marquez actually fought well. I don't know if it's age and the miles that are on his engine that are starting to slow him up a little bit. I also am starting to think that Rafael Marquez is suffering from the same kind of thing that 2 other legendary Mexican bantamweight champions have suffered from in the past, and that is Carlos Zarate and Lupe Pintor, who are both tied to each other and both tied to Wilfredo Gomez also, were extremely dominant bantamweight champions. When they were champions, with the exception of Zarate losing a controversial decision to Pintor, through their title defenses, basically ruled supreme. When they both tried the waters at 122, they got mixed results. Zarate was stopped emphatically by Wilfredo Gomez, in which he was knocked down several times in that fight, albeit Gomez fought as dirty as he could be, hitting him in the back of the head, hitting him when he was down, all that kind of stuff. Pintor was in a Fight of the Year candidate with Wilfredo Gomez in 1982, in which he almost lifted the title from Gomez until his body gave out in the 14th round, but he made a mess of Gomez's face. He would go on to win the title from Juan Kid Meza before losing it on a one-punch knockout to Somart Payakarun in Thailand in 1985. Zarate would lose subsequent post-retirement comeback fights in the 122-pound division against Jeff Fennick, in which he was routed by technical decision, and against Daniel Zaragoza in 1988, in which he was dominated in that fight and stopped in the 10th round. What I'm saying is this, that some guys who are so dominant at 118, which are Zarate, Pintor, and now Marquez have had an awful lot of trouble when they've moved up in weight to 122 or beyond. There's something, I don't know if it's a genetic thing or if it's the fact that they are bigger guys with bigger guns whacking out the fighters put in front of them at 118 pounds, and their shots are not having the same effect at 122, which is, I think, a big part of what Marquez's problem is. He scored spectacular victories and knockouts at 118 with very good leverage shots. Basically, the Nacho Beristain plan. They caught fighters, much like Ricardo Lopez did, coming into his power. And at 122, he did not have the same type of power. And I think that's what the problem is, that at 118, Marquez was dominant, and 122, he's just almost pedestrian. And I know some of you will argue with me saying, well, look what he did to Israel Vasquez. Look, he hit Vasquez with everything but the kitchen sink in order to hurt him. And my thinking is this: those two were made for each other, but against other competition like this, like Nishioka, you would think in his prime, Marquez would have had Rafael Marquez would have had no problems with this guy, but this guy pulled away from him and won a much-deserved unanimous decision victory. Also on that card, Roman Gonzalez retained his junior flyweight title with a second-round stoppage of Omar Soto, and that was a full count knockout. That brought us to the HBO card, which I was really looking forward to this fight. We're already going over more time than I wanted to spend on this. And basically, the undercard was Andy Lee fighting a rematch with Brian Vera from Contender fame. You remember 3 years ago on ESPN Friday Night Fights, Vera scored the upset of the year almost, when he, from way far behind on the scorecards, surviving a knockdown in the first round, he got up to stop Andy Lee, never got him off his feet, but scored an upset knockout, or stoppage over him. And, of course, lost more fights since then and stuff, but Andy Lee has not lost a fight since then. And the two of them rematched, and this fight went exactly like the first one did, with Lee basically staying in the center of the ring, scoring with his southpaw 1-2, right jab, left hand, dropping Vera in the second round this time, not letting Vera get him into a slugfest, get him in close distance, or get him on the ropes. Emmanuel Stewart kept, and there's going to be more news about Emmanuel Stewart, kept Lee having the fight in the center of the ring, and basically Lee routed Vera over 10 rounds. He could not get Vera could not get him into a brawl, and it wasn't from lack of trying. It was just that one guy is supremely skilled compared to the other guy, which is really what should have happened in the first fight. Lee looks on to bigger and better things, including possibly a winner of the main event down the road. Alright, that brings us to Sergio Martinez's linear middleweight title defense against European champion Darren Barker. And the thing is, I'm sorry I didn't do a preview show on this, because I felt that Barker was going to assert himself well like he did, and not so much do the damage that he did to Martinez, but hang in there and lose a comfortable unanimous decision is what I thought was going to happen. Well, he came out and showed even me a lot more than what I thought he had, specifically with his defense. And he basically perplexed Martinez by not coming straight forward, not coming in recklessly, holding his guard high, countering the counterpuncher, doing all sorts of little things or little nuances that I don't think Martinez expected from watching tape of him. And in the fourth round, cracked Martinez good and broke his nose. And that's some visual of seeing him blow his nose in the corner and blood come out. But Martinez, like a pound for pound top pound for pound boxer on the pound for pound list, and a true champion, he started righting the ship in the middle of the fight and turning the action around. Of course, Barker started getting tired, and of course Martinez started picking up the pace when he got his second win and was able to navigate around the breathing problems he had with his broken nose. And it became apparent, to me anyway, in the 7th or 8th round, that it was going to be a race to the finish for Barker of whether or not he was going to last the distance, because he was as Martinez was getting incrementally better and scoring better throughout the middle rounds, Barker's business was starting to shut down a little bit, and his defense was starting to come down, where Martinez was starting to hit him more. And the 10th round is when the fight really turned, because that's when Martinez really started going in for the finish and scoring heavily with his right hook. And Barker was catching him on the head basically. And the 11th round, Barker, who in my mind was looking to survive, caught a right hook and his legs went out from underneath him, and he struggled to beat the count but couldn't. And Martinez won an 11th round knockout. Despite what was written about him and saying that he looked rusty and not so sharp, this was a good fight for Martinez, because he was actually fighting a guy who was very hungry for a shot at the title. Not a payday, but a shot at the title. And this sometimes happens. And a lot of times, you know, we cringe at seeing fighters come over from Europe with a European champion. One comes to mind is Gary Lockett, when he fought, you know, and he wasn't necessarily a European champion at the time, when he fought Kelly Pavlik, and they just basically are cannon fodder. Something told me about this, that this was not going to go that way. One, I don't think of Martinez as a big knockout puncher or a knockout fighter. He is a very technically sound fighter, and I thought Barker was, from watching previous fights of him, that he was a rough, tough customer. I didn't expect him, though, to implore the technical niceties that he did that kept him in this fight. Now, a little bit of a comparison, and understand this is not an exact comparison, it's just a remind me comparison. This fight reminded me a lot of, very much like one of Marvin Hagler's fights. And I bring this up because after doing the last video in which I pointed you to the Marvin Hagler Sugar Ray Leonard article that was put up there, very good article, every time I go into that video to answer questions, across the right side are Marvin Hagler videos. And I was watching over and over again his the last 2 or 3 rounds of his fight with Tony Simpson, highlights against Mustafa Hamsho, both fights, somebody put videos up there, and the highlights of his John Mugabi fight. And this fight between Martinez and Barker reminded me a lot of Hagler's fight with Mugabi. The action was nowhere comparable between the two fights. Understand this. Hagler was a huge favorite over Mugabi. Mugabi was on national TV, was a very dangerous puncher, was expected only to have a puncher's chance in the fight. Martinez, top 3 pound for pound list, huge favorite over Barker, relatively unknown, but still a sturdy, strong fighter. And I was watching these fights, rewatching them is what I should say, because I watched them live when I was growing up. I don't think we can fathom how great Marvelous Marvin Hagler was, how technically sound and strong he was. And what I'm saying is this: Mugabi gave him more of a fight than people expected. Actually had Hagler urinating blood in his post-fight drug screening. And Kenny Bayless was saying this. Kenny Bayless, the referee, was an inspector back then. And I am telling you this: the punches that Mugabi and Hagler landed on each other, no boxer today would stand up to them. Hagler would have absolutely chewed up, spit out, and decimated Sergio Martinez. Don't even argue with me about this. Sergio Martinez would stand no chance against Hagler. Kelly Pavlik, not even 5 rounds or 6 rounds, I don't think. Not even, okay? Paul Williams, 2 or 3 at the most, okay? Bernard Hopkins, who's thought of as a all-time great, no chance against Hagler. That's going to do it for this show. I'll be back, folks.